Dear brothers and sisters in Christ, when we receive a gift from someone, say a friend of us or a relative of us, we receive more than a gift. When we receive a gift from someone, we receive more than a gift. What is the meaning of that saying? It's not a mere gift or a material entity. We receive also something from the giver, herself or himself, a portion of the life of the giver in and through that material gift. In other words, when we receive a gift, we also receive the intimacy of that giver, friendship of that giver, or the care of that giver. So, if we understand this, in the modern world, one of the most important questions is not traditionally most people had been asking whether God exists, mostly philosophers, scientists, etc. In fact, most of the debates in the modern world among the intellectuals are about this question: does God exist? But the important question, there is another important, much more important question or a concern, that is, does God care about us? Is God truly compassionate? Does God really take care of us? That is very, very crucial. Let me read a parable from the Gospel of Luke with regard to this question. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 18, verse 1 to 8. He told them a parable to the effect that they ought always to pray and not lose heart. He said, in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor regarded man. And there was a widow in that city who kept coming to him and saying, "Vindicate me against my adversary." For a while he refused, but afterward he said to himself, "Though I neither fear God nor regard man, yet because this widow bothers me, I will vindicate her, or she will wear me out by her continual coming." And the Lord said, "Hear what the unrighteous judge says. And will not God vindicate his elect, who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long over them? I tell you, he will vindicate them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" Now, if you a little bit pay attention to this parable, there are two main characters there. A very powerful judge. He is not fearing God, and also he is not regarding any person. He doesn't mind God. He would not care about people. That means he is more powerful than God in a way. That's how Jesus kind of depicts him, portrays him. A very powerful person. He thinks he is more important or more powerful than God. On the other hand, a widow in ancient Israel, widow means you are nothing, you are nobody. You don't have any economic base, not a regular income, your husband is not there, you don't have any legal protection. You see, you are a very weak human person, very vulnerable, very fragile. No financial security, no legal protection, etc. You see, so the story is between a very powerful person, let's say the most powerful human person, and the weakest human person, judge and the widow. And widow had a case. She wanted to get justice from this very powerful judge. Of course, he would not mind any human person. Therefore, he would not give any attention to a powerless and a useless, financially worthless widow. Meaning to say, widow is nothing in his eyes, absolutely nothing. She has no existence. She is non-existence in the mind of this judge. But this widow had a very fantastic quality. She was very consistent as well as insistent in her desire in order to get justice done from this judge. She did not, in other words, give up, even though the judge would encourage her. Or the judge did encourage her, did not pay attention, but she did not give up. She kept coming to him, asking for her request, asking for justice. And finally, what happened? It had her consistency had an impact on the judge. He thought to himself, yes, I will consider this case. I will try to solve this case because she continues to bother me, kind of put pressure on me in a gentle manner, not forcefully, not kind of by using her power or influence, by her simple plea, by her simple request, by her simple prayer and her lament. So the judge gave in to her request. You see, this widow had no any earthly or worldly power, nothing absolutely. No money, no political influence, no connections, no physical strength, no any particular education. Of course, women were not educated in the ancient Israel. They did not know how to read and write. That was not for women. So she did not have any education. Most probably she was illiterate. So she was absolutely nothing. And this judge was very powerful. He had money, influence, education, connections, social privileges, etc. But finally, who won? The widow. So it's not the power of the widow, it's the power of God. In other words, the power of her faith. Faith is not something material, something worldly. It's unlike political power or one's education or one's connections to the famous and the powerful people in the society. No. It's not our power. Faith means it's not mine actually, it comes from God. Of course, it becomes mine eventually precisely because it came from God. We could claim only things we got from God. Other things do not belong to us in a paradoxical manner. So she had the strength of the faith. The strength of the faith is eternal. The strength that comes from other things, political power, connections, education, and one's wealth, etc., is temporary. Today you have it, tomorrow it's gone. Right? Today you could possess them, tomorrow you will lose them. But the power of faith is eternal. It's going to be with you forever because it's a gift from God. Not only that, when you have faith, you also have a bit of God in you. Because power of faith means you have given priority to God, not to anything else. Even though you may have other things. Now, this does not mean we should not have education, we should not have some material facilities, or we should not have some friends and connections. But These things are very different from the power of faith, because then you have God in you. You are receiving God more and more. That is eternal, that's more powerful ultimately. So, whether that judge likes it or not, whether he would admit it or not, the widow is going to win ultimately, because it's the power of God at work in her. Even though this person, this judge, was not afraid of God, but he had to admit the defeat. You could say you are not afraid of anybody, but it may not be the real reality. What we think of ourselves, the way this judge thought of himself, may not reflect our real strength. It could be kind of a pretension or an illusion. Sometimes we tend to think highly of ourselves, right? We tend to overestimate ourselves, we tend to underestimate others. That is the case with most people. They have a very big idea about themselves, a bloated image of themselves, and a very low opinion about others. Or they tend to underestimate other people. In fact, the healthy approach would be the other way around, in a way, to underestimate our capacity and to overestimate others. At least then you could learn something. It may not be the case always. Sometime you might, in a honest way, feel you have some strength. But still, the good thing with that, when you underestimate yourself is that you are willing to learn from others. You are willing to listen to others, because you want to explore whether other people know something you do not know, or whether they have some strengths you may not possess, or whether they have experiences that you have not undergone so far in your life. So therefore, that's in a way, spiritually speaking, a healthier approach. But unfortunately, this judge had the wrong approach. He was full of himself, in other words. He was full of himself. The widow was full of God, because she did not have anything to fill herself, any worldly material things. She had only one option, one path, that is to fill herself with God. And the judge was full of his education, full of his connections, full of his powers and influence and the privileges and special prestige, etc. There was no room in him for God, not even a slight entry and opening. So he was totally closed to the stirrings of God. And the widow was full of openings to God. So God could freely come and go. But with this judge, no way. His life was sealed, walled. So it's the power of humans and the power of God. So ultimately, the God is going to win. It's bound to happen that way. That's why it's very important what Jesus asked them. 18:7, Jesus would talk like this. And will not God vindicate his elect? First question. Who cry to him day and night? Right? He's asking a question. Will not God vindicate his elect? You see, this widow is part of his elect. The elect of God, because she totally belonged to God. She had decided, she had made a decision to belong to God. The judge, although the creator of the judge is God, he is also a child of God, no doubt. But he had refused God. He did not want to be part of the elect or the remnant of God. And this widow was part of God's elect, part of God's little flock. Therefore, certainly God is going to vindicate his elects. And after that, after answering that question, Jesus is asking a question from all of us actually. When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? So we need to answer that. It's an open-ended question. It's a kind of an open invitation. We need to ask that question, whether we could remain faithful to him the way this poor widow was faithful. She's our model there. Judge is not our model, judge is not our role model, but this poor widow. Can we become like her? Could we live our lives like her? Could we totally rely and depend on God the way this poor widow relied and depended upon God? Or are we like this judge? Are we deeply and truly like this judge, full of oneself, full of himself? So we need to become honest about it. Or most of the time, how have we been behaving? Like the judge or like the widow? Most of the time in our lives, what was our predominant response? Was it like the judge or the poor widow? So we need to become honest. So this question is actually, Jesus is not asking for a quick answer, a quick response. It is for us to ponder and reflect deeply and come to an honest assessment about our own faith journey and our own relationship with God. So questions are very important actually. When it comes to the Bible, questions are more important than the ready-made answers. Because when we have questions, especially the questions we cannot answer immediately, we tend to become a bit humble and then reflect about them. Struggle with the question, that's very important. When we struggle with the question, we begin to see the light. We begin to see the need for God's grace. It's a very humbling experience, actually. So the faith dimension is the most decisive aspect in our lives. Because when one lives in faith, one lives one's whole existence, one's whole life in God. So faith is never a stagnant reality. It's not a kind of a ready-made experience. It's a journey. Faith needs to undergo constant purification. So as we grow older, in other words, as we grow older, we must also grow in faith. Then all that hardships, difficulties, frustration you are capable of facing and overcoming. Faith gives us tremendous energy, tremendous courage, tremendous interior power. There is no crisis in life actually the faith is not capable of overcoming. Faith also gives us a lot of self-confidence which come from God actually. True self-confidence comes from God. It's not our own making. It's not our own thing. It comes from God. Faith creates us anew. Faith makes us a new person, a new man and a new woman and a new creature and a new creation. It transforms us totally. More than anything else, of course, when we have an education could also transform us because we acquired a broader perspective about life when we learn things. And also one's position in society could also transform us. Is true. Let's say one is a medical doctor or one is a lawyer or one is a chairperson of a company. That also could transform him. That could also give him a sense of identity, purpose, no doubt about it. And also one's material capacity could also transform oneself and gives one some strength. But more than all these things, faith is much more transformative, much more powerful, because faith is an experience, or faith is a reality that cannot be measured. Other things can be measured. One's education, you can measure in the sense of what he knows, what is his field. Let's say he's a mathematician, then that is his field. That is the limit of his knowledge. He's a mathematician, not an economist. Or he is let's say, a chemist, not an archaeologist. If you ask some questions about archaeology, he may not answer, he may not know. If you ask the mathematician about, let's say, about the European history, he may be ignorant about it, because he has mastered a field. So knowledge is also like that. Material possessions are also limited, right? We have, like, if one has, let's say, lands, so there are limits to that. If one has houses, there are limits to that. You cannot own infinite number of houses. But faith is not something like that. Faith cannot be measured. It's infinite. It's boundless. It is limitless. Unlike anything else in the society. Even one's position, let's say one is the mayor of a city, it will last after 5 years or 10 years. One cannot be the mayor forever. One has to retire. Even in other setups and other institutions, if you are the head, if you are the boss, it will not last forever. Faith is not like that. Limitless, boundless, infinite. Therefore, you could develop it more and more and more. You could grow in it more and more and more, endlessly. Until the day you die, you could grow in faith. There is no limit to that process, unlike anything else in life. Everything else in life has a limit, has limitation. Even friendships. Sometimes good friends die, or they go abroad and settle there, so we lose them, etc. Sometimes, because of some misunderstanding, we tend to be away from each other, etc. With regard to faith, it would not happen like that, because in faith you are dealing with God. It's an experience, it's a very transformative experience with your Creator. So therefore, that is the key to success in life. We need to be successful, of course, materially, economically, in terms of our education, in terms of our achievements, and whatever the goals we have, no doubt. But the healthy way, the proper way to succeed is to become successful in these fields in faith in God. As a result of faith in God, then faith gives you an enormous amount of self-confidence to go ahead with your projects in this world and to do them meaningfully and to do them more than anything else for the sake of God. Then, if you become a very good cricketer, let's say you become a very good cricketer for the sake of God. If you become a very good businessman, you become a very good businessman for the sake of God. If you become a very good, let's say, scientist, that is for the sake of God. If you become a politician, you become a politician for the sake of God. If you become an artist, a musician, or an athlete, or a lawyer, or an engineer, or a teacher, anything, any field, it's all for the sake of God, all for the sake of Christ. So then you are, even in your chosen field, even in your chosen area of interest, you are in a journey of faith. So then you experience something bigger than your profession, bigger than your area of concern, or bigger than the field you have chosen as your life work. you experience something greater than the mere work you do, or the mere hobby or the concern you have. So then it becomes all the more meaningful. Not only that, you could draw a lot of energy to do what you do successfully. You could draw a lot of strength to do what you do meaningfully, and with more and more commitment and more vigor and rigor. So that is the journey of faith, and that's what this poor widow underwent. That's why she could not be defeated. No one could defeat her, because when you face your life crisis in faith, nothing can defeat you. Nothing could separate you from the power of God. So here we need to take this helpless, poor, weak widow as our role model. And we should ask God to make us stronger, give us strength, the way she had that interior strength. That strength comes from faith in our Creator. So remember, as I said, faith in God gives us a lot of self-confidence that cannot be taken away. It's a gift from God. It's something God gives us. It's not our own making. So the greater your self-confidence, the humbler you must become. As a result of your self-confidence, if you lose humility, you see, then eventually you also lose your self-confidence. Then you begin to have pride. Pride means you lack self-confidence. Pride is a sign you lack self-confidence. Therefore, you need to pretend. You need to come up with this false self, this false image, trying to show that you are very strong, that you are someone, that you are capable of doing it. It's a false image. That means that person is vulnerable. That means that person is a weakling. So true self-confidence comes from God, and it makes us all the more humble, because the source of that self-confidence, it's not your own thing, it comes from God. Like the widow, she knew her strength is not hers. It's the strength of God that was at work in her. So true self-confidence should make us all the more humble. And when you become humble, you grow in self-confidence. Meaning to say, you get closer and closer to God. The closer you get to God, the more self-confidence you cultivate, you develop. So that is the journey we need to take from now on. This is an invitation for that journey. And that is going to be a fantastic journey, an enchanting experience. Thank you very much. May God bless you all.